Let's get started. I don't want to take too much of everyone's morning here. Thank you all for joining us. I'm John Gestel. I'm our client relations coordinator here at Royalty Exchange, but you probably know me from any investor-related questions you may have submitted, probably chatted with me. Joining me is Rob Bernhardt. He's our corporate counsel. So contract questions, legal questions, most of that stuff cycles through Rob. Many of you may have had conversations with him as well. Normally, Dayton O'Connor, our lead analyst, is with us this morning. However, Dayton has been stricken with COVID. So he is under the weather. He won't be joining us, which is unfortunate, but that's all right. We hope he gets better. Um, let's dive in here. As I mentioned before, if any of you have any questions, please submit them through the Q&A function just so that we can address them at the end of the webinar. We'll be talking about a couple different things today. We'll be talking about overall royalty ROI performance on Royalty Exchange. Not something we normally do, but something that I wanted to share with you all because it is helpful. We want to look at some macro music industry trends, which again, really relevant to royalty investing and kind of portfolios generally as it relates to macro markets and music. And then we'll be talking about the MLC and what's going on with that. Many of you may be aware of the catch-up payments from the CRB royalty rate increase, which we've mentioned a number of times. So we'll just be going over that, making sure you all are kept abreast with how things look and kind of what to expect. So first starters, what have returns looked like on Royalty Exchange? This is from our most recent All Access piece. So this is just kind of a general summary of returns for assets held on Royalty Exchange. A couple caveats here. To be included in this analysis, assets need to have demonstrated at least 12 months of earnings. So not everything that's transacted on the site is included here. Anything that was sold is not included here. So all in returns are not included. This is for held ROI. We also, in this, lump together 30-year assets into life of rights because they are similar, and that's kind of how we generally view them. The returns are different between the two, so I've broken that out in the notes on the right. 30-year assets are averaging a 13.71% return compared to the combined, which is like 12.1%. But as you can see, this last year has been a bit of an uptick, which is great. What does this mean for royalties generally? Well, the way that I look at it, just since we have a 12-month lag on this earnings update data, is this is really indicative of how investors were valuing and analyzing royalty assets a year ago. And as I'm sure many of you are aware, a year ago was when we started to see the big interest rate hikes in the US. So what does that mean here? So that means that people were paying lesser multiples in response to that interest rate hike, kind of a natural response. And that has resulted in some increased returns, which is always nice to see, especially as it relates to the music market generally, which we'll get into right now. So this and the following slide after this are some charts taken from Luminate's music industry analysis. So they do two a year, one at the top of the year, one in the middle of the year. And they kind of look at the global music industry and what's trending, what's big, what's improving growth, everything. And this is their analysis of on-demand streaming audio growth globally. So comparing 2023 to 2024, and as you can see, it's a pretty significant increase. A couple different reasons for this. First of all, just more people getting streaming services, but also the emergence of a lot of different international markets, notably Latin markets, India, and a lot of African markets are also contributing to this. But 15% overall growth in streaming effectively is one of the reasons why we are so bullish on royalties and why a lot of royalty investors are bullish as well. So this kind of growth, great to see. And it really lends credit to the prior slide of people, buying these assets and seeing higher returns as a result. So this is something that we'll keeping an eye on, just because obviously we want to be fully aware of how the music industry is moving, since we're working in largely music. And then as for those specific growth trends that I was just talking about, as you can see, Latin music, far and away the largest growing genre, and that's largely pushed by South America as an emerging market. Mexico, Brazil is a big one also. Brazil is a really, really robust music market. But I thought that these were also interesting just because we often get questions about genre, people asking, oh, what's the best genre to invest in? While we don't really ascribe to any one being the best, um, it's important to understand that there is different growth in different areas, notably in Latin music. Next here, we'll talk about the MLC. So this is a slide that I've used before. It's just kind of a general rundown of what happened for those of you that might not be aware. Basically, the Copyright Royalty Board, every 5 years, they reanalyze the royalty rates for streaming mechanical royalties and a handful of others, just to make sure that that royalty rate's keeping up with the evolving tech landscape. The mechanical royalty was originally created for like vinyl, cassette tapes, CDs, keeping up with that kind of technology as a royalty as a result of those sales. Now it's largely in relation to streaming. So this is the increase of those rates. So basically, the CRB said streaming services, DSPs, you need to pay out a higher percentage of your overall revenue in royalties to artists to keep up with, the times effectively. So since this was a retroactive mandate, it means that years 2018, 19, 2020 pretty much will have royalty rate increases in those sequential increases, percentage increases from 10.5% up to 11.4, 12.3, 13.3, et cetera, and so on. Now, one of the questions that we even had submitted today is, why haven't I seen these royalty catch-up payments yet? So I wanted to include a slide that gets into why. So it's important to remember how the money flows for these royalties, okay? So first, the music gets streamed on demand, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, etc. And that's what the MLC collects. It collects those royalties from those DSPs directly, okay? The MLC then pays out those royalty collections to stakeholders. Sometimes it's individuals, there might be indie artists, but oftentimes it's to publishers. So then it gets paid to the publishers, which then cycles down to the songwriter or individual who would then sell their rights on Royalty Exchange. So something that you would have acquired on Royalty Exchange. Now, since the publishers tend to pay out on a biannual schedule, as opposed to the MLC, which pays out monthly, that means that the publishers are now accruing these monthly payments from the MLC to then pay out in their subsequent distributions. Now, these payments first started in May of this year, which is when we had our one of our webinars where we actually talked about the first announcements for those payouts. Now, since publishers will pay out in April and September, that means that the first catch-up payments are expected this coming September, when publishers will pay out that next distribution. So that's why you may not have seen that yet. We don't really do direct deals with the MLC for a variety of reasons. But publishers we work with all the time. So if you have a publishing catalog that's earning US domestic streaming mechanical royalties and you've been expecting these catch-ups, that's the expectation. That's kind of the structure that we're working in, and why you haven't seen that. Now, let's talk about what is included here. So the MLC does provide updates on what is actually in processing. So they give, a handful of different digital distributors, or DSPs rather, and which royalty type they're currently working on, either partially paid or unpaid. Partially paid would be stuff where it's like, hey, we paid out at the 10.5% rate. Now we're going to pay out the 11.4% rate, that difference, versus, oh, we didn't know what to pay, so we paid nothing. Now, in this next selection here, it's GTL, Mixcloud, Pandora, QOBUZ, which I'm not familiar with, Rhysizio, and YouTube. So a couple of big names in there. And that's for usages that are 2018, 19, and 2020. And that does not include the partially paid. So they've mentioned that they need more time to get all that stuff organize together. I mean, it's a staggering amount of data. So a little bit of a delay there, and that's something they were a bit prepared for. They did mention these payments will likely extend into 2025. So these catch-ups will come for a bit longer. But not really any concern. They're pretty transparent about how all this stuff works to their members. So um, that's what's to be expected in the next payments. They also mentioned that they started working on Spotify, which naturally, I think most people understand Spotify is the biggest DSP in the world. Um, so yeah, a lot of data there. So they get their own kind of special processing timeline. But they've started it, which is awesome. It's only for 2018, 2019, and the first payment for that is expected to be in August, which again, that will cycle hopefully in September if all that gets paid out in time, but we'll see how that looks. And that's just about everything that I had prepared for you all today. Rob, anything that you want to add for any of these slides or anything I might have missed?
The first on our returns,
Yeah,
that is basically everything that's purchased on our marketplace. It doesn't take into account what the multiple was paid or what the dollar age of the
correct.
asset was at the time of purchase, and those have some pretty significant impacts on the returns, obviously. But this is
Definitely.
just lumping everything that's transacted on the marketplace, um, all time, I guess.
Yeah. Yep.
Right.
Excluding things that are sold, in which case that would start a new 12-year clock. There
Right.
are some other exclusions, like, for example, fixed return assets wouldn't get included here because they were kind of a different beast altogether. So stuff like that. If you are interested in seeing the full report, get the All Access membership because that includes a lot more analysis beyond this, including comparisons between musical composition and sound recording and those different rights types. We also look at the cash on cash returns for 10-year deals, which, as you can see, these overall returns are declining, but the cash on cash is actually I think it's like a 19% return on those. Just because it's a 10-year, we do some math trickery to make this a little bit more realistic. So it's a much deeper analysis, gets into a lot more specifics. This is just kind of the general. So yeah, definitely some caveats to be had there. And like Rob said, this is inclusive of everything, whether it's 50-year-old catalog or a half-year-old. Well, I guess it can't be a half-year-old, a 1-year-old catalog. So yeah, inclusive of everything. Okay, let's get into the Q&A here. Um, I guess we'll start with our submitted questions, and then we'll run to the uh, the live questions. So we got about 40 some odd questions here. We might skip a few because there's some duplicates. A lot on returns, which is great because we've already answered a lot of that. Okay, so the first one I have here, what are the average GP gross profit percentages and ROI have been for the past 5 years? Also, what is the ROI percentage forecast for the next 5 years? Well, for that, take a look at this. It's not 5 years exactly, but it's a solid four. Um, I would say all in for everything, it's like closer to a 13%, I think. For stuff in this analysis, obviously the overall is closer to like 11%, 12%, and that will fluctuate year over year. Um, Projections, forecasts, we don't do that. We work with just the data we have. So any kind of forecasting is up to you. Obviously, we are bullish on this stuff, so we expect growth across the board, but we can't give anything beyond that. We are not fortune tellers. We don't know what's going to happen. Um, so yeah. Next question here. How are music royalties collected and what factors influence the amount paid? Um, so royalties are collected through a combination of licensing fees from things like um, PROs, performers' rights organizations, usages, sales of vinyl, CDs, stuff like that, digital downloads, live plays, basically any kind time that music is played. And then those will cycle through various different entities that exist to then get to ultimately you or the rights holder. And what factors influence this stuff? How frequently it's played, pretty much. Um, Yeah, pretty straightforward. If you want more information on that, we do have a bunch of guides that get into the specific collections of the different rights. That can be found on the blog page on Royalty Exchange in the investor resources section. We have one that's specifically called Who Collects What for Who. So that gets into a lot of it. In fact, that little flow chart I had in this um, gets into is from that specifically. This chart here. So you want to take a look at that. It's a pretty good breakdown. But we've got lots of walkthroughs in there.
Yeah, John, that kind of ties into a question that Peter had just submitted. Kind of, can you break down the different types of royalties, where they come from? It's a big question. He said he's read the blogs and everything. I think I'm going to try to find that one that you had just mentioned, just to
Okay.
make sure, and I can send that in the Q&A. It probably is a bigger question than we have time for here in the investor Q&A, but it's a great question. And Peter, if you want to email us directly, we'd be happy to set up some time to talk to you as well.
Yep.
Just to kind of walk you through the differences and the underlying parties that receive royalties and where they come from and who's responsible for making sure that they get paid out. It's a really good question. Just unfortunately, I don't think we're going to have enough time to fully answer it as much as I'd like. So if you're comfortable, certainly reach out to us and we'll set up some time to talk.
Yeah, I've got like a 600-page book I can offer you to read that gets into it. But or we could have a call. That's up to you. Cool. All right, next one here. How is the ROI calculated? Um, it's revenue over time held compared to purchase price, waiting for term length, effectively. It's pretty straightforward calculation. Next one here. Listing 4195 emphasizes a song from the band Empire of the Sun. 98% of the income is from two versions of one song by the band. So this isn't really a question. I assume your question is why is that the case? Um, so when an artist, band, whoever submits a track to start collecting royalties on it, um, there can be cases where multiple versions of the song or multiple basically work IDs can be generated for that song. And that's to make sure that when the collection agency is collecting these royalties, they're making sure that they're getting all of the royalties that are owed for it. So whether it gets logged, like say it gets logged in Spotify under, song number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then in Pandora it's logged as song number 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, right? But it's the same song. Well, assuming both of those work IDs are logged underneath that same, parent ID, then they all flow to the appropriate places. So that's why you might see multiple versions in a single track list. Is just to make sure that all the royalties are collected appropriately. Um, I think that kind of answers the question. Rob, do you have any thoughts on that
Yeah,
one?
I took a look at it real quick, and it looks like there's a few remixes as well.
Okay,
So,
yeah.
when a new artist takes an original work and remixes it, that creates a new um, either composition or recording. So then that will have a new copyright attached to it. And if those royalties are on the listing as included in the sale, then those will also be included um, if you purchase them, if they've been created at the time that the purchase happens.
Okay, cool. Moving on here, I would like to know more about this. Is this legal? Does this take away from the artist? Well, first, yes, it's very legal. There are lots of individuals, entities, people buying this stuff on Royalty Exchange and outside of Royalty Exchange. Does it take away from the artist? Only if they are selling their rights directly. So when any property is created, there's normally lots of different individuals aside from the performing artist himself who have an entitlement to royalties, whether it's a songwriter, producer, whoever. Any of those individuals is allowed to do whatever they like with their stake in the royalties. So often for us, we're working with a songwriter who helped write, Drake's song, whatever, and has a songwriting credit that they're collecting directly from, various different entities. So it doesn't take away from the artist, especially without their knowledge or anything like that. But that individual who's selling, yeah, I mean, they're selling the royalties and they're getting a payout for it. That's how the system works. So pretty straightforward there.
Hey, John, real quick to jump back to the question about
Empire
the
of the
listing
Sun.
that had multiple songs.
Hmm.
Yeah, that Peter actually just jumped in and said, question is why are there 98 other songs included when only two of them are actually making most of the money?
Got it.
And that's a good question as well. Why are the other ones included? It's really always up to the seller on what's included and what isn't. They have different motivations for selling certain things. Sometimes they just want a fresh start. Sometimes, they just want to add a little incentive for an investor. It's really kind of all upside at that point for an investor to own the rights to the royalties for a larger catalog. Um, those are kind of the two biggest that we typically run into, but sometimes you'll see that it's just one song. Sometimes you'll see like, hey, it's the whole catalog I have at whatever this royalty distributor is, and I just want to be done with it and start the next phase of my career.
Yeah. A great example of that kind of upside paying off for an investor actually is an investor that I met with a few months ago. He bought a catalog that ended up having one song by Harry Styles in it. It was making virtually no money compared to the rest of the catalog. And then, 6 months later, Harry Styles started performing that one song, and now it's the second highest earner in the catalog. Um, so that's the kind of upside that you as an investor can look for. As if you're looking through a catalog and you find a track like, hey, I know that song, I know that artist, like this has a lot of potential. Well, you can factor that into your decision making. And if that's something that you want to, I don't want to say gamble on, but keep that potential earnings for the future. Um, so just something to keep in mind when looking through any catalog. Having a wider swath of songs to earn from is generally a positive. Whether or not they're actively earning at the time, there's always the potential. Same methodology can be used for like sync earnings specifically. While you can't really predict it, it is nice upside to keep if you have a catalog that generates sync. Okay, next one here. How much do you need to invest? It's really up to you. We like to say the low end of asset acquisition pricing is like between 5 and 10K. Um, Rough numbers here. Uh, we required a catalog to have earned at least $1,000, depending on where it's being paid from, before we'll consider it. And then assuming it's getting paid some multiple of that for if a thousand earned in the last 12 months, say a 5X is kind of like a medium to low end. So there you go, 5K right there just for a base small catalog without any kind of additional metrics going into it. So assume that definitely a few thousand, but the higher you go, the I'd say the easier time you'll have acquiring, just because there's a smaller buyer pool. Next one here. Hello, how to make sure we invest in the artist royalties that will bring us constant quarterly? Do you assist us for this? Um, I assume you mean constant quarterly returns. So we are not financial advisors. So no, we cannot advise you on what to buy. You do have to make that determination yourself. We can help you get familiar with how to look at this stuff. So it's not uncommon. I'll have a call with someone, we'll walk through a listing, what to look at, what earning sources are contributing and what that means, what to look for in the raw data, just to kind of get you up to speed with how it all works. But unfortunately, we cannot advise you on what to buy. So that is up to you. Is there a minimum investment? We kind of just answered that. When I buy a music royalty, I want my name and my wife's name on it with joint survivorship. How does this work? Can you explain? Rob, take us
Yeah,
away.
it's pretty simple. So when you get verified as a bidder on Royalty Exchange, you can let us know if you'll be purchasing via an entity or individually, or how you want the documents reflected when you make a purchase. So at that time, you could just tell us, here's how I want the purchase agreement to read, and we'll reflect the joint tenant piece for you on the agreement.
Great. Next question here. Understand the details of the royalty, all the numbers involved. We kind of addressed that earlier. That's a bigger question than we have time to address here. If you'd like to set up a call to talk through that a bit more specifically, let us know. We can do that. What is the payout procedure? Can I upgrade / convert my from individual to institutional account? How do I monitor revenues? Yeah, good question here. The payout procedure is pretty straightforward. Once you buy something as part of the closing process, you'll set up all your banking information in our payment portal. Once that's done, then everything that you'll need will be found on Royalty Exchange. You'll go to your buyer dashboard. You'll see your assets listed there. That's where you can download any statements that for payments you'd have gotten. You can see all the payments there too, and it'll calculate your return, all that good stuff. So there will be both a PDF summary and a CSV detail statement for you to download there. So that's where you can monitor all those returns. Upgrading your account or changing your account from an individual to an institutional account is super easy. Really, all we need is the entity information, just so we know what to populate on contracts when you purchase. And that's really it. You would need to have an individual payment account for yourself versus the entity because they do have to be separated. But again, just go through the setup and it's pretty straightforward. Everything will reflect in your buyer dashboard for your one account, whether it's from the entity or from your individual. Just everything that you own will be kept in one place for you. So it's pretty easy, pretty straightforward. Just let us know. We'll collect the information. And then any acquisitions you make, we'll reach out and say, hey, do you want to use your entity or do you want to use your individual name? And we'll populate the contracts accordingly. So pretty straightforward. Okay, next question here. Is this legit? What's the average ROI, tax considerations, FDIC insured? So we mentioned those first two already. Tax question, one we always get. It is actually illegal for us to provide any kind of tax advice surrounding royalties. So I have to tell you to consult your tax advisor. We do have some snippets in our FAQ page that gets into tax considerations that you might want to take a look at, but we cannot talk to you about it. Bring up what we posted on the FAQ to your tax advisor, and that's the best we can offer you. FDIC insured, I mean, these aren't securities. So like there's no overarching insurance or anything like that. You take on the risk, just like with any other investment. Rob, anything
Yeah,
you want to
John,
add to
just
that?
yeah, real quick on the tax piece is in general, royalty exchange royalties are taxed on a 1099. So they're taxed as ordinary income. So if that was part of the question, then we can certainly answer that.
Okay, yeah, good point. Next question here. Some of the royalties have missing income data. How can we get them? Okay, so no listings on Royalty Exchange have incomplete data. That's a hard line we have. And if ever you notice that something is incomplete or you feel is incomplete, let us know right away. Generally, if something has an update or has incomplete data, it gets removed from the site. It's super, super important that we're presenting this stuff as accurately as is possible, which means all the information that's available. Otherwise, it's a misrepresentation of the asset, and that's a huge problem and something we don't allow. So yeah, always let us know. What you are likely referring to is royalty payors paying in arrears. So they actually pay on a slight delay. And depending on which company is providing the royalty payments and how they report the data, it may present as a larger or shorter delay. Great example of this is ASCAP versus BMI. ASCAP pays royalties based on when they are earned versus when they are paid, and BMI is vice versa. So what that means is that BMI catalogs, the way they present their data, shows a 2 quarterly payment delay compared to a 1 quarter, which is what ASCAP does. Where it's really the most up-to-date data that's available. It's just how they classify their data. So that's likely what you're referring to. If it's not, and there's something specific, again, let us know right away. So that way we can take a look and make sure that nothing is broken or incomplete or anything like that. But that's likely what you're seeing.
Yeah, every asset on Royalty Exchange will reflect the most recent payment
Yeah.
that was made, and then the investor is entitled to the all future payments after that. Yeah, if for some reason a quarter or one period was missed and there was a reason for it, we'll call that out on the listing. If there is a missing quarter without any sort of notation, that's an error, and there shouldn't be any. But if you notice any, certainly let us know.
Yeah. And there are some weird payout processes that you might see too. Like, for example, PRS, sometimes they'll do out of cycle payments, which may reflect unusually on a listing. In those cases, we'll flag it. We'll say other notes, hey, like you'll notice that this quarter was, outlandishly high, well, that's because there was a out of cycle payment in the middle of it, and that's why that is. So normally we'll call that out. But yeah, just wanted to add that too. Next question here. How do you know that you are actually in ownership of the rights that you are buying? You'll get a purchase agreement with a direct contract between you and the seller of the royalties. So that's going to be effectively your certificate of ownership. And then, we also assist with that, acting as the administrator on those rights. So we, make sure that all the paperwork is filed, assigned, done correctly with the royalty payor. So you also have us to help support that. Rob, since this is a bit of a contrast question, anything you want to add to that?
No, yeah. So you're always in direct privity of contract with the actual owner of the royalties. And this kind of goes into a diligence question that comes up here in a minute. But the way that we handle assets is when a seller wants to list an asset for sale, what Royalty Exchange does is we confirm that that seller is who they say they are, that they own what they say they own, and that they have the ability to sell it. So what we do is we do a asset check, a lien check to make sure there's no encumbrances on the asset. We contact the distributor directly to get the royalty statements. So everything, all the data that you're seeing on the marketplace is obtained directly from the distributor of royalties. It's not the seller just representing this, that's what they earn. The data is correct, and we also check with their distributor, the company that pays them the royalties, that there's no outstanding issues on the account that might affect the assignment. So those are things that we do before an asset even gets to the marketplace. So that's kind of our diligence process, and that helps clarify who you're buying from, and that they do own what they say they own, and that you now, the investor, have the right to receive those royalties.
Okay, next question here. How do you link your bank account to Royalty Exchange? That's only done after you purchase something through our payment processor portal. That's really it. It's pretty straightforward. Next one here. Do you envision any improvements to rights collections internationally? So this is a tough, big question too. Short answer is yes. Long answer is change comes slowly. Especially internationally. For example, in the EU, there's been talk of improvements based on payouts for sound recording stuff, neighboring rights, stuff like that. And as I understand it, only 2 countries in the EU have adopted it so far, and that was like started a couple of years ago. So yes, there will always be improvements to the overall system, especially as more money enters the royalty investment space. It just requires more transparency, it requires more data, better data. So naturally, it should improve. But yeah, I mean, you're talking about big 100-year-old entities that have been doing things a certain way for a long time, and they move slowly. They change slowly. So any improvements on that side of it will likely be slow, but hopefully they're coming, especially as technology gets better. So we'll have to see. Next one here. A lot of the listings I see have terrible returns, e.g., royalties over fixed term equals the purchase price. How to make money? So one thing to keep in mind is that we automatically relist all eligible assets on the marketplace. So that way, all investors have liquidity potential, exit plans, something for their royalty assets. Otherwise, it's a pretty illiquid asset. So many of the listings that you're likely seeing, especially the 10 years that are fixed terms with a reduced term, those are held by someone else who set their own pricing for it. So it's not exactly like an originating artist that is, looking to offload the royalties. This is someone who actively owns it and saying, I'm not really interested in selling it, but if you want it, here's the price. So that's the first important thing to keep in mind. The exchange itself will automatically filter by owner activity. So the more active asset owners, newer sellers, things like that, they will automatically cycle towards the top or be in the featured section. So that's where you'll want to focus a lot of your efforts. I would still encourage you to go through the whole list. I've been surprised many times with someone who's I thought would never sell their asset. They get a good deal and then they sell it, and they get a great sale. The person who bought it got a great price, and everyone's happy. Happens all the time. Um, so I would still encourage you to look because you never know. But generally speaking, the stuff that's looking to move, price to sell, that's going to be filtered automatically near the top of the list. So just a little tip for you there. Next one here. How are the royalties divided with investors? So this sounds like a question about fractionalized ownership, which we don't do. So on a listing, what you see is what you get. The financials, the data, everything you see is specific to the share that you're buying. So it's not divided with any other investors. It's divided with the original rights holder if they're selling like only 50% of that royalty piece, for example. But that's it. Otherwise, you're getting everything that is presented in that listing. So I think that answers that question. Let's see here. Next one, diligence question. We did that one. Can I leverage royalties like stocks for loans? This is a great question and one I also get all the time. I have now had two instances of investors that I've spoken with who have successfully done this. Um, so I would say if you manage to do that and successfully leverage any royalty holdings you have for a loan, let me know. I'd love to hear about it, hear the specifics of the deal you got, how you did it. Because if that's something that I could tell people confidently, yes, you can, I'm going to tell them that. But for now, I've only heard of two instances. And one of them was a little bit unusual, but still it worked out. Um, Generally speaking, one of the reasons why royalty exchange exists is that larger financial institutions, banks, etc., would not allow artists to collateralize this stuff because they just didn't know how to evaluate it. So we created this market so that artists have financial options that aren't predatory. That's one of the reasons why we exist. So yeah, if you manage to successfully leverage royalties for a loan, let me know. I'd love to hear about it. Next question here. What are the most common exit options? Reselling your asset. Very simple. That's why we relist stuff. Is that why you had the opportunity? Next one here. Isn't it true recent stock market volatility makes steady royalties even more attractive? Yes, absolutely yes. One of the great value adds of having royalties in your portfolio is the uncorrelated nature to traditional markets, uh, which is fantastic. So yeah, true. It's one of our big selling points for this asset class. Rob, anything you want to add to that?
Nope, I'm with you.
Uh, how secure, in quotes, is my money when investing in royalties? I mean, that depends on the price you pay for the asset you purchase, really. I mean, if you're asking about the validity of the collection agencies and them paying out correctly, we are pretty careful about ensuring that any companies we're working with are legitimate companies that do this. So a lot of indie publishers we actually won't work with because they're just too small. Um, Most of these companies are, like I said, huge companies. ASCAP's been collecting royalties for 100 plus years, and they have outside governance that they need to abide by. So, in that respect, very secure. Like nothing's going to implode one of those entities. That would require a massive, massive catastrophe, which is just immensely unlikely. Um, but ultimately, the security of your investment depends on what you pay for the asset, pretty much. Um, Next question. How does Royalty Exchange obtain the royalties? Is it through a label or the artist's portion of the royalties? Generally speaking, we're working with artists and individuals, though we have worked with some labels directly. It's just pretty rare. Um, Mostly it's individual rights holders who have a royalty stake of some size. Um, Rob, you have any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, no, it's typically one of the creators. We'll get into this question here in a second too. Every once in a while, we'll get the actual publisher or a label who is interested in selling their piece. But I would say in more than 95% of the deals on Royalty Exchange, it's either a songwriter on the composition side, or it's a recording artist or producer on the
Yeah.
label side. So it's someone who's involved in creating the music.
Yeah. Next one here. Can we have info about the transfer of copyrights, and can the creator terminate the transfer after 35 years if life is purchased?
Yeah,
Rob.
so this is a good question that kind of gets into a little bit of a nuance of U.S. copyright law. So the law states that if you created something and you assign your copyright to another entity, so in our case, in the music case, it would be either you're a songwriter, you assign your copyrights to a publisher, you're an artist, you assign your copyrights to a label. You have the ability to terminate that copyright transfer 35 years after it happens. So it's kind of it created to give creators a chance to reclaim their copyrights when maybe they have assigned them early on in their career when they didn't have a ton of leverage. So that's where the provision comes from. There's some sliding scale dates on when the songwriter can do that. So that doesn't typically apply in royalty exchange deals because since you are purchasing the rights to the royalty stream only and not the copyright has typically already been assigned to that publisher or label. So if you are the investor and you're purchasing the rights to the royalty stream from the actual songwriter or artist, you will have those rights for the lifetime of that asset. There was a case actually earlier this year where Sonny Bono's wife sued Cher to get a share of royalties back when so what the court decided was that the contract assigned the rights to a certain amount of royalties to Cher for the lifetime of the song. Therefore, the copyright could not be that could not be terminated because the copyright was not included. So since royalty exchange deals do not include copyrights, it's just the right to the royalty stream, then our investor receives the rights to the royalties for the lifetime as well, and termination does not apply. So even if a songwriter were to terminate a copyright assignment with their publisher, then the investor would still be entitled to the royalty stream itself, regardless of who owned or was administering the copyrights. I hope that makes sense. It's kind of a complicated piece of law, but it was certainly clarified earlier this year in that Cher case. If you want to take a look at that.
Cool. And then, just to clarify from that, right? If someone terminated from one publisher, they still want to collect on that. So they'd probably get a new deal with a new publisher somewhere, maybe for better terms. So that's what we say would, no matter who's collecting it, say they moved from, Sony to Cobalt or whatever, um, you would still get the royalties. They would just come from a different company. Can we buy a piece of a catalog? How will I receive the revenue rights? Um, you can't buy just a piece. You got to buy the whole thing. And we already talked about our payment portal and all that stuff. So that should have answered that. This is the catch-up payments for the CRB3 agreement seems to be not paid out yet. We addressed that through the slide. Will the new payment platform give summary or breakdown of quarterly earnings as the previous payment hub did? So you won't get any statements or anything through the new payment processor. That's all going to be on your investor dashboard. So that's where you want to look. We're trying to keep everything as centralized as we can. So once you get all your information set up in the processor, you don't really need to visit that again unless you need to change any of that. All of the payment data, statement data, that's all going to be on your buyer dashboard. So that's where you want to take a look. What are the best metrics to evaluate royalties? Kind of a big question, along the similar lines as what royalties are there to collect. And different people will have different opinions around what is best. So I would say let's schedule a call to talk through it because it's going to be more than we have time for on this call. And then, make your own determination about what you think the music industry and the future of the music industry is going to look like. Because I think that's going to impact it a lot too. Obviously, radio is not as long living as streaming. Sync is not as long living as radio. Like there's different things to consider. Next question here.
One,
Option. Oh,
sorry,
sorry.
John, just to add on to that, one metric that we came up with years ago is called dollar age. It's something that we've seen to be super important and correlates to returns. You can just honestly just Google dollar age and all of our articles will come up. And I just checked and it looks like I didn't even notice this. There's an article in Rolling Stone that references our dollar age calculation as well. So if you want to do dollar age music royalties, you can search that if you're not familiar with the term. It's something that we found to be pretty useful. So certainly take a look at that.
Yeah. And this can get confused with the term vintage for a catalog, which is what some people look at. Our dollar age is a bit more relevant because it weights the earning tracks of the catalog based on their age. So it's a bit more accurate of an all-in age of the catalog compared to just the vintage of the overall band or primary earner or something like that. So it's a bit more accurate. Okay, next one here. Option to get alerts when specific criteria are matched. For me, for example, I'm interested in rights not played in the US. So we don't have that functionality yet. It is something that we have talked about and very likely could be a feature in the future. So a bit more specific catered marketing for specific assets, but I'd say stay tuned. For now, we still market everything because you never know what's going to appeal to somebody or who, maybe even you, anonymous question asker, may find that there's a US domestic catalog that really speaks to you and you want it. So we just send everything to everybody and take a look. The best way to know is to take a look. But we may develop something like that in the future, so stay tuned. Next one, how can a rights holder list their rights on your platform? If you are talking about something you purchase on Royalty Exchange that doesn't automatically get listed, send us a note. There should be a link for you to do that in your buyer dashboard. If not, chat in. Normally you're reaching me and I can say, yeah, we'll get it up for you, no problem. So let us know if it's not automatically relisted. What's the trend in multiples on music catalogs? So that is a specific all access piece that we do, where we look at multiples paid for different, terms of catalogs, different rights types, stuff like that. So to get into access to that, sign up for the all access membership. Would you list more book royalties, including recipes, coloring books, formulas, etc., royalties for me to buy, please? Sure. We would happily list more book publishing. We just don't see a lot of it. Book royalty collection is a bit different from music collections, so we kind of have to address that stuff on a case by case. We've done a few book stuff. Some of you may have seen, like for example, the How to Draw series, which is a really popular, like walk through on drawing cool stuff. People tend to buy that on the holidays, so it has huge spikes in November, December. And we've also sold some reading material that's like educational. But it's just a different royalty collection structure. So how we can include it and make sure that it's, safe for the investor that's buying it, that's all the things that we have to consider as part of the diligence of it. It's just because it's not like a existing structure like music royalty collection is. So that's why you don't see as much of it, because it isn't just a bit different. But we're happy to include it as long as it fits with what we can do. What would a coming recession mean for royalty investors if the rumors of an impending recession are true? Well, we are not, fortune tellers, so we can't say if a recession is coming or not. However, the uncorrelated nature of royalty assets implies that your earnings would likely still do just fine. People don't typically stop listening to music just because there's a recession. This is kind of one of the age-old selling points of like music and movies from, like, for example, the Great Depression, when Hollywood had like its biggest boom ever because people wanted escapism, and music is a very easy access point for people, especially today. So it likely wouldn't impact your royalty payments much at all. So people do tend to go to royalties as a good shelter for that stuff. So that's kind of our expectation. But we'd have to see. Historically, yeah, it's been very uncorrelated and therefore very safe. But again, we don't know, so you never know. Rob, any thoughts on recession stuff?
Nope.
Okay, cool. Next question here. What if anything is being done to address AI fakes of cataloged artists? Um, so we don't really include any AI stuff. We had one go up once and then we immediately pulled it down because it was not a good fit. Um, so yeah, we don't really do the AI thing here. It's also not really something that we monitor. Really, that's something that like major publishers, major music players, that's what their big concerns about because that really takes bites out of their, you know, profit margins. Um, so we don't include it. And then obviously, Universal, Sony, they've already made strong stances against AI as it feeds on their owned content, stuff like that. Um, so, the AI in the music space issue is something that we have been watching closely and will continue to watch closely. Um, but for now, there's not a whole lot we can do about it. Just kind of respond to what the bigger players have to say about it. Next one here. How do you value music? What is the process? How do you source your song deals? So kind of what we said before, that's a bigger question than we have time for here. Um, as far as sourcing, since we are the biggest royalty market in the world, most artists come to us, but we also do have full-time staff that's constantly networking, talking to new artists, bringing them into the fold, actively bringing in more artists looking at some of the catalogs. So combination of those two things. A lot of word of mouth referrals to people who had good experience with us. It's a pretty straightforward, easy to understand process that everyone normally really likes. Um, so a lot of that. Next question here. Knowing you can't give tax advice, nevertheless, how do most investors in this industry handle their tax status slash situation slash filing? So, so yeah, we can't give tax advice. Like Rob said, you'll get a 1099. So however you want to handle income like that is really up to you. Plenty of people run their income through a trust, through an entity, and plenty run it through their own individual holdings. So it's really up to you.
You may have the option to amortize your purchase. Um, I know some folk do that. I don't know what the majority of people in the industry do. But again, yeah, just certainly check with your tax advisor.
Yeah. And again, look at our FAQ because we do have some snippets on amortization specifically. So you'll want to look at that. Next one here. How can I access more granular income data? How can I see earnings of closed deals? And tell me more about the All Access membership. Okay, so first part, how can I access more granular income data? You can't. We provide everything as granular as it comes. So that's the best we can do. We give the data directly as it comes from the payor. Um, so that's the best you can get. How can I see earnings of the closed deal? Look at the relist. It's the best I can offer you. When deals close, we do remove the raw data from that because it goes on to the new listing for it. Um, but yeah, beyond that, we don't offer that closed deal data. Uh, tell me more about the All Access membership. The All Access membership is effectively a membership for serious buyers on Royalty Exchange. The biggest perk is that we waive buyers' fees, which is a scaling fee. So the more you pay, the bigger the fee. It ends up being a 1% fee for assets that are over 50 grand. So there can be some pretty significant savings for those that are serious buyers. And then also, of course, access the All Access pieces, which does, much more in-depth macro analyses of the royalties market, how things are performing, what's going on in the world, in the music world, I should say. And yeah, there are a couple other features that have recently been removed that will likely be reintroduced as we restructure them, like our standing order program, which is our automated investing feature. But really, the big perk is the fee savings. There's also discounts for if you were to sell an asset, you get an additional 20% off the sales fee. Um, so yeah, it's really for that.
John, this ties into one of our submitted questions in the Q&A. Just a kind of a follow-up. How much should your investment budget be if you are to consider All Access?
That is a good question. So it kind of depends. Generally, I start to have the all access membership conversation if I'm talking to somebody who indicates they're looking to spend more than $100,000 in a year. But even then, I would say like, hey, like let's talk through your plan here to make sure that's actually right for you. To open up a membership, it's a $4,997 all-in purchase price. And so that includes a $4,000 startup fee and then a $997 annual fee. So the annual fee is really what I focus on because that's where the longevity of the savings comes into play. Um, but it really depends. Like if you're planning on buying, 10 assets with a $500 fee each, like that, even if they're cheaper assets, that already is the sizable amount of fees, right? So it's kind of on your strategy and what you're really looking to do. Um, I would say reach out to me. Let's have a conversation. Let's look at what your budget is, what your plan is, what you're looking to do, and then we can talk about it. I'll be honest with you. I'll tell you, like, yeah, this is probably worth your while, or like, hold off, don't do it. There are also things we can do, like we can retroactively apply the fee savings to the membership if you purchase something and aren't an all access member. So if you buy something, you reach out to me, say, hey, John, like I want to get the all access membership. I just bought this asset. Great. I'll create a rebate code for you. Just apply it at, checkout for the all access membership, and it will basically deduct the buy fee that you paid for that from the membership sign up. So it's like realizing the fee savings right away, but without rolling the dice on if you get an asset, and having to pay the membership fee. So we can do stuff like that too to kind of make it a little bit easier for you. But ultimately, yeah, reach out to me. Let's talk about it and see if it's right for you. Next question here. What do you envision for the company over the next 1 year or 5 years? What do you think, Rob?
Just more improvement, more deals. We're always working to bring more deals to investors and to make the experience of buying and selling on the marketplace better. We've just recently switched to a new payment processor to administer the royalty payments. Obviously looking for improvements on that end. Yeah, just more and better.
Yeah. To that specifically, I foresee faster payout times, which is awesome. I know several of you on this call I've had conversations with about that. Yeah, so really, really looking forward to that getting up and running. Once, the full transfer is done with the new processor, we can really focus on the admin side. You know, it's gonna be so much better. I cannot wait. Um, Improvements to the exchange generally, whether it's more filter options, better tagging. We're working on a couple different things that will enable us to bring more assets to the exchange, which is really exciting. It will also make it easier for us to relist stuff. For those of you that have stuff that can't be relisted, needs to be manually requested, whatever, it should make that much easier too. So a lot of quality of life improvements. And then, yeah, just general growth. The more we grow, the more investors we bring in, the more competitive the pricing gets, which brings in better prices for the artists, which makes it more attractive for more artists, which brings in better catalogs and, kind of self fulfilling prophecy there. So yeah, the more we grow, the bigger we get, the better assets we get for everybody. So that's kind of the expectation. Last question here. What is the best way to make your first investment? Tough question. I would say determine your budget and then make offers. And I would say don't be afraid to make offers. Obviously, be mindful of what you can afford. Um, Offers are binding, so you can't withdraw them. Purchases are binding, and if you back out of a purchase, you're banned. Period. End of story. When we also are liable to, or we can hold you liable for fees incurred for if you back out of a payment. So like really don't do it. It's really bad for the market. If deals fall through, we really don't like it. And so we're really serious about like, yeah, you're banned, done, gone off the platform. This opportunity is closed for you forever. Um, but yeah, make offers. That's really the best way. Um, the system is designed to be a negotiation. Obviously, you can buy stuff out if you want to pay the list price. You think that's fair? Great, do it. You know, we're bullish on this stuff. So the bigger catalog of royalties you can acquire, the more income you have coming in, the more you could put to this to royalties. You know, like grow your income. Um, but that only happens once you get the first one under your belt. Um, so make offers, do negotiations, make counter offers. It's really the best way. And then you'll get the best deals that way too, because you know it fits with specifically what you're comfortable paying. But that again,
But I mean, on a fundamental level, the asset, understand the asset class.
yep,
You know, everything that happens on Royalty Exchange is public. You can go look at similar deals to see where, you know, what the rights types were, what the earnings were. You know, you can get comfortable with what these assets do. Compare different listings, watch, see what other investors are valuing these at. Like it's, you know, it's there's a ton of information available just on the marketplace itself. So you
yep.
can use that to get familiar, and then that'll help you gauge on what you're comfortable paying for something, and then like John said, just start making offers.
Cool, cool. All right, so that closes out the submitted questions. So did we get through all of the Q&A ones?
Yep.
We did. Okay, cool. So I'll give you all just another 5 minutes here. If you guys have any last questions, stuff you want to chat about, maybe from the presentation, something like that, now's your chance. I hope we addressed all your questions satisfactorily. But if you do have other stuff that you want to ask about, if you want to schedule a call, a direct one-on-one to talk through an asset, talk through the All Access membership, let us know. I'm sure many of you know we're very easy to get a hold of. We are here for you guys to make sure that you have everything you need, you're taken care of to be successful on Royalty Exchange. So take advantage of that. It's why we're here. But for now, I'm going to collect some of the resources that we talked about and put them in our chats so that you guys have those. Give you all a chance to formulate any questions. And then if there are no more, then we'll close this out and wish you all a good rest of your week. So give me 1 second here. Pull these resources up. Okay, so this first one here is our Royalties 101. Now, this has some great flow charts on the different rights types that are created, collected, and how they pay out. So that one's super useful. The next one here is who collects what for who, which we did mention earlier in the call. So this gets into composition versus sound recording, how those rights flow to people. So also really useful flow charts just for understanding the different royalty types that exist. And then let's see what else we want here. Here's our publishing guide. So this one gets into the publishing royalty specifically, and then we have a companion piece to this one about sound recording. Both of which have also flow charts about the specific rights that are under each umbrella. Bjorn, I see that you raised your hand here. Did you have a question you wanted to submit to the Q&A? I'll give you a minute to type it out. Okay, no problem. No problem. And then let me see here if we have, oh, here's one on amortizing royalties. Again, useful for everybody. Let's take a look at that. And then I'll also grab our dollar age one just because I find that one to be one of the most useful. So this article gets into the dollar age specifically. It has the formula for how we calculate it, things like that. So I know kind of a lot. You can also find this stuff on the Royalty Exchange website. So, if that's easier for you, great. If not, there are the links. We are recording this, so if any of you need to review this later, you will have access to the recording. It'll also get published in the blog page, so that's where you'll find it. And you actually will probably get an email about the recording from Zoom, I believe. But okay, so those are all the links that we talked about. Those are all in the chat there if you need them. I'll give you all just one last minute here for any submitted questions, and if nothing else, then we'll call this meeting adjourned and wish you all a good rest of your day. So last questions going once, going twice. Okay. Well, thank you all for coming. Again, I'm John Gessel. I'm our client relations coordinator here at Royalty Exchange. And then with me is Rob Bernhardt at Corporate Counsel. I hope that this was helpful and informative for you. If you have any other questions after this, feel free to reach out to us. You can reach me at investors@royaltyexchange.com, or you can chat into the site and reach any staff of Royalty Exchange there. I hope you all have a good rest of your day and rest of your week. And yeah, good luck with your royalty investing.
Thanks for your time, y'all.
See you, everybody.